live. How about this one? That's a better one. We'll go live right that.
Love it.
Like that. That's what we're doing. We're like,
Love
huh?
it.
What are you doing? What are you doing, Hans? That's right. Okay, boys, we're on in 3, 2, 1. Well, Zach Wilson over Trevor Lawrence isn't anything new or exciting. It's about what 1/3 of the league thinks, but what does Matt Waldman think? That's always the most important. It is the Audible Live and his triumphant return here on March 25th. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom will be joining us in just a little bit. Matt Waldman and Dr. Jene Bramel. Matt, you're looking good, buddy.
Thanks. I mean, I'm awake, so that's a good thing. I've gotten enough sleep thanks to my buddy Gene and a bunch of other folks who are editing the RSP, getting that ready for April 1st.
I was going to say RSP time. It's RSP time, almost time for the RSP. April 1st, everyone. Mark your calendars. Every single year, the rookie scouting portfolio will be going over that and more tonight's program. Dr. Gene, what's up, dude?
Not much. Now it got to be the end of April. Not the end of April yet. Even Matt wouldn't think it's the end of April yet. End of March. That went quick. How'd that happen?
It did. Hey, we're already 3 months in. Usually we start this around the beginning of March, so apologies, my bad. So here we go. It's time to talk about all this stuff. But first, some injury news and information and situations, Dr. Gene, that we wanted to pick your brain about and appreciate your time here as always. I want to start with Kenny Golladay and just how, okay, Golladay shows up. They're going to work him out. The Giants are thinking about it, but they had to take a look at his hip. That was the big thing. Is there going to be some sort of holdup with his hip? No, he did not get the 1-year deal. He got a 4-year contract worth as much as $76 million, $40 million in guaranteed. So I guess the hip checked out okay. Dr. Gene, what are your thoughts there?
I don't think there's any reason to think that Golladay didn't get a lot more suitors on the free agent market because his hip was an issue. They did do an MRI before they signed him. Golladay, toward the end of the year, when it became evident that he wasn't going to return, whether that was because he felt like he was going to be out in free agency and didn't want to risk any further issues, or the Lions weren't, there wasn't much reason to bring him back necessarily, kind of allowed that it was a hip flexor strain that was causing him trouble. Called it a muscle strain. Some beat writers were able to say flexor after that, and that really shouldn't be a lingering issue over the long term. When you hear hip that lingers, aggravated, 4 to 6 weeks after the original injury, you worry, is there any impingement? Could there be some labral issues? He didn't have any surgery this offseason as yet, and everything points to the fact that flexor was probably the concern there, which means it should be well behind him. Conditioning shouldn't be an issue moving into camp. The Giants signed him to a fairly sizable contract for the end of what looks like that first wave of wide receiver free agency, so I expect him to be healthy leading into training camp and probably even should be able to participate in off-season training activities.
Well, Gene, let's talk a little bit about Marlon Mack and his Achilles injury. What does that mean for him? Certainly, Jonathan Taylor closed out the season on a strong note, provided top 10 production for fantasy players. But what about next year for Marlon Mack? What are we looking at?
Well, Mack is unfortunately working against a long history of running backs not recovering from Achilles injuries well. Now, is that because it's mostly been older players and players that are I hesitate to use the word fringy in terms of NFL terms because these guys are very, very talented. But, we're talking about Kalen Ballage, Isaiah Crowell, Donta Foreman, Arian Foster later in his career, and a number of other players. And none of those players, when they suffered the injury, were exactly, 350 carry, 1,500 yard players necessarily. And Mack is a little bit younger than those guys. Ballage was a little bit younger, obviously, but there's just a long history of running backs not particularly playing well through injury. But we've seen wide receivers over the years recover and play well, Michael Crabtree among them. We've seen a number of explosive edge rushers play effectively after Achilles surgery. So, there's room to think that a high caliber NFL athlete can recover enough explosiveness to move on. But, what we're seeing with a lot of these players, and you would probably include Mack in this, that, he doesn't necessarily have, 1, 2, 3% of his explosiveness to give away and still be effective enough to be, a bell cow back in the backfield. And that's not what they're expecting of him anyway. I think, the reason you bring him back is he's well respected in the locker room. The Colts know what he provides to the team. You've got a player like Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines there as well. So that Mack is not going to necessarily be a full-time player. By all signs, his rehab is going well. kind of 8 to 9 months has been what we've seen from players' recovery, which would put him right up against training camp from the September injury. He's been saying that he's expecting to be a full go for training camp. And there was a source that Adam Kaplan posted on Twitter a while back that said that Mac thought he was about 80-90% recovered. So he's, as I said, he's fighting against an uphill battle as far as what the previous comps show, but hopefully he ends up more on the side of the explosive edge rushers than what we've seen with some of the running backs in the past. So I don't expect him to be a major contributor in 2021, and we'll see how training camp goes for him.
It only took 5 minutes into our first live show of 2021 where it's going to make it a Broncos show. And it's Courtland Sutton time because people are all worried and concerned. And what are the Broncos going to trade for a quarterback? Could they trade one of their wide receivers? Actually, Jerry Jeudy. Maybe if Courtland Sutton came back full strength. He's posted videos, Gene. Unless you're all up into videos like P. Diddy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't exist unless you're posting it online somewhere. So we've seen the videos. Sutton's running again. How do you feel about the big-bodied receiver and his recovery from his knee injury?
Well, he was running again, but it didn't look like he was moving very well, and you wouldn't expect him to yet, just 3 months or so. I guess we're going on 5 months now. When he started running, it was January. Those videos that we saw there, running a little bit of routes earlier this month as well, which was a good sign for him. The concern with Sutton is that it wasn't just his ACL that was injured. It wasn't an isolated injury. We know for a fact that the MCL was injured as well. The team allowed him 4 to 5 weeks to recover and to allow the MCL to heal before they chose to have surgery. And there was some hinting from the local media, you're probably aware of this, Cecil, that maybe there was some meniscus issues there as well as part of the reason that they allowed him some extra healing time before he underwent his reconstructive surgery. So, the end of October being a surgery, usually think that it's, again, a 7 to 9 month situation. It's going to put him right up against training camp. It's been a lot of good things that you're hearing locally, and I'm reading locally about Sutton's recovery, but this still takes time. He's got a lot of hurdles that he has to overcome. If the rest of his rehab progresses smoothly, you could see him potentially starting camp on the active roster, and I think that's what they're going for. His expectation is that he's going to be ready to go, but this will be a situation where, unless he's doing more than we expect in off-season training activities, and you wouldn't expect him to really be doing anything at all, is that he's going to be one of the many players that we're waiting to see whether he starts on training camp on the PUP list or not. Can he be ready for the regular season? Absolutely. That'll be kind of 9 months or so. The end of July into August is going to be in that 9 to 10 month range after surgery. And if his rehab goes smoothly, I think we'll see him on the field in week 1. But first hurdle is going to be able to be on the field relatively early enough during training camp to prove that he's in condition in time for the opening week of the regular season.
Gene, I'd ask you about a study performed in China in 2012, but apparently you're not ready about that until next month. So
One more month.
One more month.
You don't appreciate my cycle jokes.
No, I do. And I think that the rigor in that was pretty good too. So, but just wondering if there was anybody else from an injury standpoint that we need to be, be keeping aware of as we head into this spring part of the season.
Well, I think Dak Prescott's going to be on everybody's mind is to see how he's recovering from that ankle fracture and dislocation that he had last year, knowing what the Dallas Cowboy offense went through with all of the issues on the offensive line, and then the downgrade from Dak Prescott to Andy Dalton. Everybody is going to want to know for offensive projection purposes and the NFC East race whether or not he's going to be healthy enough to get back, and I expect that to be the case. Still a lot to go through this offseason as we continue to go through what we expect to see from players recovering from injury. We're coming up very soon on when we're about to get the next bit of information. Usually the offseason goes a little bit quiet through free agency, and the first time we get a lot of extensive press conferences with teams and GMs and coaches and players is shortly after the draft, when teams do their mini camps and what have you, and coaches get asked questions about their injured players while they're discussing draft picks. So within the next month or so, I expect to get a bunch of updates from injury, and we'll update all of that on the website as we go forward.
That's right. Dr. Jene Bramel at footballguys.com. Dr. Gene, super quick. A couple things, really. The Kyle Rudolph thing, I guess they worked it out, right? Because it was like, hey, there's kind of a foot thing, and the deal was on hold, but it wasn't going to be changed, and then it was changed. He's a giant now, but right. There was a snafu there.
And I think it's hard to know. We're not exactly entirely out of COVID protocols. Galladay was able to get into the Giants special surgery hospital there and get a pretty full physical. I think there's probably going to be some situations in which players just aren't able to get in as quickly as you'd expect. And if there's any lingering concerns while you're swapping medical records and imaging studies, sometimes things get put off a little bit as you wait and see whether or not there's anything left to be concerned about, whether or not there's any additional studies that you'd like to have done. So, Rudolph, being there behind Evan Ingram's probably not somebody that you'd bring in and want to completely look over head to toe if there's any COVID issues, protocol issues going on there, but it doesn't seem like there was any issue with the signing there.
Okay, one more before we let you out of here. Matt, did you have something for Dr. Jene?
I did, and it's just one that kind of comes to mind. Is there a certain body type with some players that you worry about their ability to play through minor injuries at a higher level? I mean, I know that's kind of a vague question, but I'll give you a specific guy. Rondale Moore kind of being a short, really thick-thighed type of guy who has, great burst, great speed, great explosion. But watching him at Purdue at points seemed like he was playing at half speed some of the time. And just wondered if there's anything to the idea that if he's dealing with any type of muscle strains, that he's going to be a fraction of himself compared to maybe some other guys who might have the same type of injury and can still perform at least a little bit of a better level.
Yeah, I think the answer is probably, as usual, going to be it depends a little bit. I don't know that there's a particular body type that would have you concerned just because he's got very large thighs. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily expect A.J. Dillon, the thigh capital of the NFL right now to be concerning. But
Quadzilla.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Quadzilla. But it depends on where the muscle strain is, how long you allow it to recover, what sort of training you have around you, and how seriously you're taking your rehab, whether or not you have some other undiagnosed injuries that we're not aware of. So the answer is yes, but maybe not. And the people that know the answer to that question are those closest to him and those able to examine him and assess his medical history to date. So it's possible,
we'll
but
never tell.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. So I wouldn't have too much concern about that. I get worried about pattern of injury a little bit, and there are certain injuries that concern me. We've talked about in the past things like back injuries and what have you. Concussion history are always put you in a little bit higher risk category, but muscle strains that are allowed to fully heal a player that's fully developed like that. Those larger players, maybe you worry a little bit more about wear and tear on the joints or tendons because of the extra muscle mass. But I don't know that any of that has been proven in any sort of NFL studies to say that, X body type is more concerning than others. I'm sure certain teams will have certain opinions about those, but I don't think that I'd expect bunches of teams to drop up a talent like Rondale Moore down just based on the strength of what his body shape looks like.
Dr. Jene Bramel join us here at the Audible Live, and to quote one Sir Smoke a Lot, yes, God, if you listen, help. But doctor said I need a bacchiotomy or whatever in the hell Caleb Farley got. And I don't need to necessarily talk about Caleb Farley specifically, Dr. Jene, seen as potential top 10 pick now with the back, whatever the name of the procedure was. It has to do with his back, but no combine. Right, Matt and I were joking around before the show, like, "Hey, no combine." Like, I don't know. So, but teams, the combine's there for medical purposes mainly, and for scouts to ask stupid questions to prospects. But okay, are we going to get a little more of this, where all of a sudden Caleb Farley, he needs back surgery, but he's going to be fine for training camp? Is this going to maybe crop up with a couple of more players in the draft because we didn't get a combine?
Yeah, it's very possible. That's sort of what happened last year, where there were a number of players that, when they got there, were discovered to have issues or decided to have issues because there weren't going to be a ton of combine workouts and pro days later on in the draft process. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, but I do think what you'll see is, the importance of pro days in addition to, missing the combine there. So are the numbers that we're seeing trustworthy? Are teams going to get a chance to examine, or are they just going to be reliant on what they're hearing from agents and what's in the medical medical files that they're getting from colleges. I think that everybody is going to the pro days with the intent that we're going to get a little bit of face-to-face examining time, and I think the interviews that happen between now and draft day are going to be important too. So this happens every year. I imagine that this year, like last year, we may see a handful more than what you'd expect, but those are, I would say, good things. If there's something that's happening, you don't really want to find out come rookie minicamp in May and June that there are issues there. You'd like to get them taken care of sooner than later. So far we haven't heard. I think there was kind of a rash of Jones, fifth, the bone on the outside of the foot surgery last year. Just teams deciding, or agents deciding, we kind of know where things stand. Now let's go ahead and get this taken care of so that we're able to do everything that we need to do leading into training camp. And that may be what we see this year as well. But I think the pro days are going to be awfully important for a lot of these players.
The detriments of flying coach to the pro days. I don't know.
All right. Dr. Jene Bramel, you check out his work at footballguys.com. You follow him on social networking at Jene Bramel. Always good seeing you, brother. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
He's on
Peace.
mute.
He was on mute. He muted himself to leave.
He gave us the mute. There we go.
All right. Now, Waldman, let's do this, baby,
Cecil,
because it's
let's
draft time, and we didn't get our normal Senior Bowl road trip. You know what I mean? I didn't get to spill my guts to you about what I saw at the Shrine Game and all that. And we haven't got to share any notes, honestly, on the Senior Bowl either. But let's get to these quarterbacks, because I think it's a little kitschy, right? And God bless you and people like Dane Brugler and stuff like that who don't buy into the super hype of like, hey guys, Zach Wilson. Like, yes, if you talk to teams and if you've actually watched Wilson, the teams are going to appreciate him. And as I said at the opening, about a third of the league has him above Trevor Lawrence. So what does Matt Waldman think? That's all that matters to me. And listen, this to me is when I suggested, based on intel, Matt, last year, when some teams, they like Justin Herbert more than Joe Burrow. I said that on the air locally, and some of my co-hosts, I'll name names, like D-Mac, lost his mind. There's no way. And Joe Burrow, well, Trevor Lawrence has done it longer than Joe Burrow did. And are there teams that like Wilson more than him? Yeah, it's probably about 10 of them. So where do you come down on this? Because I think people are a little late to the Wilson hype train, but now it's becoming overly ridiculous where it's like, you know what, guys, hot take. Wilson over Lawrence. It's like, oh my God. Let's just talk about this, dude, and let's break it down.
So the quick answer is that's crazy. The longer answer is that Zach Wilson, if you squint hard enough and you put him in a system like the Cleveland Browns or the Minnesota Vikings or what the Jets will likely do with Sam Darnold, if Sam Darnold is still the quarterback at the end of the day, where they do lots of play action, 2 tight end sets, run the ball, throw to spots off the rollout, the Jake Plummer offense and, under Shanahan, that's all this is. If they do that, I think Zach Wilson has a chance to develop into a competent quarterback in the way that Baker Mayfield is developing into a competent quarterback, where he's going to be able to make throws that you would expect a pro to be able to make, that you're going to prevent him from making mistakes that he shouldn't make as a pro. And that's great. But when you watch Zach Wilson outside of that, just from comparing him to the other quarterbacks right now, the idea that that there's 10 teams in the league that thinks that he's better than Taylor, than Lawrence, is kind of like that whole 5 Heartbeats movie where the guy brings in the 5 horsemen and they're like, you'll have to go, you can check this out on YouTube. But basically what you're looking at here is basically you're bringing in a barbershop quartet to try and imitate the Temptations. And I think what you're seeing here is that Zach Wilson is the answer, just like Drew Lock and Jordan Love were the answers to, we missed on Patrick Mahomes. We didn't consider Patrick Mahomes. So we, in our arrogance, think that if we find a prospect who can throw on the move, who can get outside the pocket, who can make downfield throws with a strong arm, that we can coach him up. Because after all, Patrick Mahomes needed a year. No, he didn't need a year. They had Alex Smith. It was a luxury. I mean, the scouts were literally getting their popcorn and giddy every week in Friday practice tape watching the scout team of Mahomes because they knew what they had. You don't walk in your first start against the Broncos in the end of the week and have John Elway tell you we're going to, or tell the media he's going to be a problem for us for a long time after one game, because
Right.
all those weeks of him being on the scout team. Okay. He learned a lot. It helped him.
Yes.
But Zach Wilson, when you look at his game, first of all, when it comes to players who are squatting in coverage over the top of the receiver at the opposite sideline, there's not a throw like that he doesn't want to try.
Yes.
Okay. And
he gets so cute with it too. He loves trying to test that.
Yeah. It's like Jordan Love, except with Jordan Love almost didn't get away with it on a regular basis. Zach Wilson was getting away with it in a way that there's no way that he will in the NFL as much as he does. He has mechanical issues with his front leg where that front leg locks out. And so what happens is that he either sails the ball downfield or he sails the ball short, and then intermediate and deep it gets short. He's not able to get the velocity on the ball that he should get with it. Then you have the idea that, well, he doesn't have a lot of these throws, but when you see the types of throws that come in where he has to lead a receiver into the coverage, he doesn't really show a lot of deference to that receiver. He has a little bit of a penchant, even though it's a small isolated deal of hospital balls that he throws. And then there's the whole pocket, which is, look, he can get outside the pocket and throw on the move. But at the same time, there's some issues that he has with trying to do too much. So to me, he's a lot more like Baker Mayfield than a lot of people get. They get cringy when they hear you say he's a lot like Baker Mayfield. But to me, he is. I mean, the choices that he makes, the accuracy issues that you see in terms of what's projectable to the NFL, not the box score. To me, I had to really work hard to put him in a tier that said he could become a starter. And I see where that can happen. But to me, it's much more confined with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence may have played in Rich Rodriguez's offense, but he can do everything. And the idea, to me, Zach Wilson, he throws some pretty deep fades. His deep accuracy after charting more than 10 games isn't that strong. Hey, Bloomy, it's not that strong. There we go.
Yeah.
And so when you chart his games and see that everyone's talking about his deep accuracy, and that may not even be the strength of his game other than the back shoulder throws, what you're looking at is a prospect to me that everyone's bought all the icing, but there's no cake underneath it.
Well, I'm concerned about how cute he gets with the ball. I think it was the San Diego State game, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, where he's missing the slant play on the left, and he tries to cut it underneath because he waited too long. Like the read was there. It was coming hot. They were coming from that side. There was going to be an extra rusher. And Wilson's like, nah, I don't want to take that slant like I should. I'm going to try to sidearm underneath it. And it almost was a pick six.
Yeah.
And again, it was not San Diego State. I might be mistaken, but okay, that's San Diego State. In the NFL, that's some big fat defensive lineman waltzing into the end zone. So the concern to me with Wilson is he does not like pressure. And I know every quarterback doesn't like pressure, but for the hype that this guy's getting and the talent's there, the athleticism's there, the arm angle and off platform, blah, blah, blah. I agree with you about the front leg. But to me, it's are you getting cute with it or are you doing what you need to do? And there's too many hospital throws. There's too many cute throws when you really watch to know, is that guy going to make immediate impact or is he going to take some work?
Yeah. And it's definitely a work thing for me. He's not even in my top 5. Yeah.
Wow.
And he hasn't been, and it's just one of those deals where he's just outside of it. And I think that he does have a grade that says can be a future starter with the right system for his development, like Baker Mayfield. Yes, it's very similar to grade that I gave Baker Mayfield when he came out. But to me, it's a grade where you're kind of squinting to go, yeah, right offense, that can work for you. But it's just, I think people really have bought into we can find a Patrick Mahomes. We're going to keep
and
looking.
He's getting Mahomes
Part 3
comparisons and Bloom as we bring you on. Welcome, brother. And two, I just hate that. Like, watching Wilson's fun, but when people start saying it's like Pat Mahomes, it's like you're not watching what you need to be watching.
Yeah, well, it is. And we've already talked about this once before on the show, right, guys? That the NFL is going to get the wrong lesson, right? They're always going to learn the wrong lesson from these things.
Sounds about right.
Because Zach Wilson, he does make these off-platform throws with these crazy arm slots, and he does like to exist right at that edge of what is possible. But I think what is giving some pause, and I'm sure is at least part of the reason that Matt doesn't have him very high, is that he's doing that in ideal surroundings, right? You know, it's like Carson Wentz, right? When Carson Wentz had that great offensive line and actual good pass catchers, then Carson Wentz doing his thing on 3rd and 14 looked amazing. But when he didn't have any structure around him, Carson Wentz collapsed. And I think Zach Wilson, so that's, you know, maybe the fear if he goes somewhere like the Jets, right? Is that, at least you're going to have that Shanahan offense installed to give him that structure. But what everybody likes about him is his play outside of structure, his ability to improvise. And I just don't know if that is a false positive because of how BYU's level of competition and the offensive line and some of the things he had going on made the game a lot easier for him and made him look a lot better. But at least out of he and Justin Fields and Trey Lance, which I think this is the question right now, right? If you're not Jacksonville, if you're the Jets, if you're Atlanta, if you're Philadelphia,
you should
Detroit,
want Trey Lance.
Well, of course you want Trey Lance. Yes, I think you want Trey Lance.
But the NFL is going to take Zach Wilson.
Well, the NFL might be more inclined to take Zach Wilson because of the three, he looks most comfortable engaging defenses as a passer. You know, it's just his home mode, and he seems to have a fast processor. He seems to, you know, he's comfortable as a passer, more so for sure than Justin Fields, who outside of structure I think would prefer to run than pass. And Trey Lance I think can hang, but there's even more level of competition concerns. But I would be less concerned because I see that competitive toughness in Trey Lance, and I think that he's more adaptable. So it's going to be fascinating because I'm jumping in here midstream. Thanks, everybody. Hey, it's good to be back. It's good to see your lovely faces. This is going to be the draft. At the week before the draft, everybody knows number 3 quarterback or number 4 quarterback or how the picks are going to pan out at the top of the draft. So I think we're going to learn a lot about how these franchises scout quarterbacks. And look, we've got a new regime for the Jets, a new regime for the Falcons, a new regime for the Lions. Heavy to get a guy. I think that Trey, and just thinking about what they didn't see in Teddy that they wanted, I think that Trey Lance, a lot of the same scouts that love Ohio State are still there. Talking to Matt Batanti about this, and he brought that up. So maybe that's like a Justin Fields connection there. What I like about this is it's totally up in the air, and that means we
could see 4 in the top 10, 5 in the first round, and
Davis Mills will get drafted for sure.
I'm so glad you said meh on Kellen Mond, but that's
that's from the Senior Bowl. I was like,
just to add to the point about Carson Wentz and playing in space, Patrick Mahomes makes one of those crazy throws and it doesn't work out. Nobody says anything about that, and I don't think the NFL has really looked deep enough to understand sometimes. Maybe I'm sure the scouts have, but I would imagine that maybe the decision makers who don't scout maybe look at it and think, well, that's going to come with experience. And that's where I think they get it wrong because, when you look at Drew Lock's logic, when you look at the logic with Baker Mayfield, or you look at the logic with Zach Wilson, it's not there. It's not underpinned with a combination of logic and awareness of what you can and can't do. Patrick Mahomes practices that stuff just like he practices everything else. So where it's a refined point. And I think these other guys don't practice it. They wing it a little bit more. And if they do, they still overestimate what it is they can and can't do. And if you do that as a quarterback and a leader, you're screwed.
Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. Bloom, I'll throw it to you and talk about fantasy implications because Jacksonville, okay, Carlos Hyde, but all right, you look at the talent that they have and how guys like Visca, they're going to get that bump, right? When you look at Trevor Lawrence out there, and shall we all agree, since Andrew Luck, we haven't seen a guy like Trevor Lawrence people may say, let's talk about Wilson. Like, no, let's talk about Lawrence, because I don't want to gloss over this generational talent that we're going to see Bloom, and how does that show up when he's throwing to these Jacksonville guys?
Well, what you like here, and and by the way, like it's Trevor Lawrence clearly number one, and it's not like he's a perfect prospect, but his ceiling and the combination of what he brings and what he's already accomplished in his career. I mean, this is why Jacksonville was lucky to get him. Now, can they provide the structure around him? I think Darrell Bevell going and getting Marvin Jones is a really terrific start. Marvin Jones is the kind of player, he's tremendous in the red zone. He's fantastic contested catches. He's great working the sidelines. So that's going to help. We already know what DJ Chark can do downfield. We have Laviska Shenault, who I think, Urban Meyer didn't get Curtis Samuel. He ended up in Washington with Scott Turner, so maybe Viska can do some of those things. Jamal Agnew is an interesting name to bring up here, simply because he's getting paid $5 million this year. That's not return specialist money. He was playing offense with Bevell. So you're bringing those guys in, and I think whatever Bevel's going to want to do with the offense, having Marvin Jones and Jamal Agnew in that room is going to really help get the younger guys up to speed, because they're going to bring in another receiver. I would expect them to draft another receiver pretty high, first or second day for sure. Maybe in the back half of the first round with that first round pick that they have. So it's exciting because, what do we associate Urban Meyer with? I mean, the spread offense and making a system that puts guys in positions to succeed. What he did with Tim Tebow or whatever. And Trevor Lawrence is, even in college, I think had more to offer than Tim Tebow did. So it's really exciting. And for fantasy, bringing it all back to fantasy football, I think Jacksonville and Washington are the two offenses that are most fun to take players from, because we have no idea how much of a bump the whole offense is going to get just from having good quarterback play, from having a whole sense around the offense that's an exciting offense and players can be used to the top of their potential instead of having to row upstream against a bad quarterback play.
Matt, why didn't they get Alex Smith to I mean, he knows Urban Meyer's offense from their time at Utah. I mean, he's out there. It's not like he's going to push for the starting job. Be a hell of a guy behind Trevor Lawrence.
I guess maybe the purse strings were too tight for a veteran of that nature. They
got $100 million cap space, man, or they did at the start of free agency.
Yeah, who knows? It's a good question for sure. One thing that I know that Bloom mentioned, and you mentioned, was best prospect since Andrew Luck. And I think you'll see in some circles of our internet community that this is overkill. But to me, I think it's more overkill if you believe that Andrew Luck was a peerless and flawless quarterback prospect at Stanford. I mean, most people forget that Luck missed pre-snap tells. He made boneheaded throws into coverage that had rivaled pretty much any of the prospects who've generated reputations for recklessness. And the zone blitz might as well have been kryptonite to him early on if you watched him. I mean, if you have a realistic understanding of what Andrew Luck was, then the stylistic comparisons are really apt. And you also understand that Lawrence is physically and technically, if you ask me, Luck's superior. And he's really sound as a thrower and pocket manager. He stands up to physical play well. He's conceptually prepared. I think he learns from his mistakes during the games. He delivers solutions, I think, when defenses try to trick him with the same tactic later on. And like guys like Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson, Lawrence really knows how to use his legs. Like, he'll bait coverage into giving up their position when he goes off script, and he uses his eyes and legs well to manipulate opponents on the move. So, the difference between him and, between Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson is that Lawrence has a top drawer arm. I mean, he can deliver all the throws. You're not going to have any offenses. You're not going to have to conceptualize your offense to hide some of the weaknesses of a good quarterback who doesn't have a great arm. Lawrence is a great quarterback prospect with a great arm. And I think that physically there's no limitations for him, and the scheme doesn't need to hide anything for him. And as a result, when you've got a guy like Laviska Shenault who can run, and you can run misdirection with the threat of Lawrence running and then run the throwbacks that he ran at Clemson, and you've got Chenault. He's an upgrade in the open field to Amari Rogers, who's a fine prospect in his own right. And then you've got, as Bloom talked about, Marvin Jones, who basically can do a little bit of everything for you. I mean, he can run after the catch. He's been a slot receiver in Cincinnati. He can be the split end if you need to and win against the likes of players like Xavier Rhodes in the top of their game, and then he can also be a flanker for you and run pretty much every route in the tree. So you can move him around and he can be kind of your, think about your variety of a little bit of what every Clemson receiver was for Lawrence at one point. And you're still looking at Chark, who, who can give you that Mike Williams kind of vibe and also be a even bigger deep threat. So I love where this is going. If they can get Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, who we'll talk about, I'm sure, on another show, maybe in the second round, I think that would be a great get for them because I think he's the best blocking tight end in this class and a good receiver that he gets the baby Gronk comparison, which maybe I'd say Gronk with a speed governor. But he certainly is a good player and would be a great fit for that team and where they want to go.
I saw Heath Miller as a comparison for.
That's a nice one.
I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It makes me miss Heath Miller, Bloom.
Yeah.
I'm like, so underused.
I loved Heath
so
Miller.
underused. It's one of those like Mercedes Lewis when he came out, or Daniel Graham. I'll go back and be like, he could do so much more than Ben
Watson.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so much more there. All right, there's more there. Maybe not with Justin Fields. Let's talk about that because the Ohio State, you always get I swear to God, he's not Dwayne Haskins. Okay, and it's interesting. I watched a little mini documentary on Haskins, and it kind of makes you go, can he recapture that what he had before, his time at Washington? Getting off track, but to talk about Fields, I'll toss this to you first, Bloom, and Matt jump in, of course. The thing that I don't like is he's really slow in what he does.
Yeah,
he's really slow. His motion is slower. His decisions are slower. He's a see it, throw it guy, which doesn't mean he throws with anticipation. It means, now the guy's wide open. Now I'm going to start to throw. My mechanics are slower. My decisions are slower. The athleticism is there. I think he handles pressure better than Wilson. But with Fields, it's like, can you caffeinate him something, Bloom, to get him to go a little faster?
It's some of the stuff we were saying about Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, you remember Jalen Hurts when you're watching him. That's what's going to be interesting if Philadelphia has a shot at him, although I guess since they have Joe Flacco, they don't need a third quarterback in the room. I don't know. Fields could easily be one of those guys that the sum is not equal to the parts, right? Because some of the parts are excellent. Athleticism as a runner, he checks that box. He can push the ball downfield. I mean, he can make 20, 25-yard downfield throws look very simple. And as you mentioned, Cease, in my notes, I have deliberate. He's a deliberate thinker.
Yes.
And when everything gets faster, you're not sure. His timing can be okay within structure, but as a runner, he can be dangerous. I don't think so. It's funny. You have two runners here in Fields and Lance, and I think Lance is such a natural runner that sometimes you just smile when you're watching him because he really does turn into a running back once he's a runner. And with Fields, he isn't quite as natural. He isn't quite. You'll see moves, you'll see toughness, but sometimes he doesn't look as natural as a runner as you want him to. He's his downfield accuracy sometimes can be breathtaking. He definitely has the zip to keep the whole field in play, but I just see something, and maybe I'm watching the wrong games. I just see somebody that when the progression is over, he doesn't want to stay in the pocket. And when he's out of the pocket, he's not thinking pass. It's not impossible for him to make a play outside of the pocket as a passer. It's just not comfortable for him. It's just not natural. And I don't think that's something that you can coach into a player or teach a player at this level at this point. I think they either are. I'm thinking of late career Colin Kaepernick, where you're basically saying, like, go through the progression, and if it's not there, man, you can take off. That's fine. Now, is that the kind of player you spend a top 5 pick on? That is the part I'm not sure. I think Colin Kaepernick at his peak, when he was really meshing well with the structure around him, looked like the kind of quarterback that should go in the top 5, but it was a short peak to his career. So, I also think that one of the things that when I watch Justin Fields is I think he's a predictable thinker. I think he's a linear thinker out on the field in the way that he attacks the defense. And I wonder if that's something that will eventually catch up to him. I think it's just one of those things that while tools-wise, and, people are going to look at the game, what was it, the Clemson game? I mean, the game when he was just lights out and say, wow, like that points to what he could do. But I think that there's always going to be that sense with him in his career, like what could he become? But I don't think it's ever going to truly come into focus because I just don't see him having that natural enjoyment and relishing engaging the defense as a passer. I think he just plugs into the play, and when the play doesn't work, that's when you want him to run because it just doesn't feel comfortable when he's outside of the pocket, or it doesn't feel comfortable to him to hang in the pocket.
What about a year behind Matt Ryan? What would that do, Matt?
It could be very helpful to him, actually, because I think Justin Fields would have benefited from another year. But at that said, while I think he has a little bit of a lower grade on my list, probably compared to maybe other independent scouts who do this type of work, I think that he's the type of player that if he gets the right fit to express his talents best, he could be the most productive quarterback in this class, hands down. And I think that he's the type of player that you have to use a little bit of imagination to make the comparison here, because it's not a one-to-one build to build, throwing style to throwing style, way that they play the game type of comparison. But to me, Justin Fields needs to be on the Josh Allen plan. And to me, that Josh Allen plan was you basically allow him to improvise and run and make some of the goofy mistakes that Josh Allen did for about a year and a half, 2 years. And you continue to figure out what he does well. And you give him, for Josh Allen, it was, let's run a lot of levels concepts where we have fast receivers running crossing routes across, in the middle of the field. So there's 2 to 3 to 4 windows for each receiver working across the field. So he has multiple opportunities to be able to get rid of the ball, so that he's not making dumb mistakes. And that cuts down on the, some of the things that happens where Allen would self-destruct. And they let him run early on and didn't try to push too much on him. They let him be a running quarterback. I'd say even more so than Lamar Jackson, because at least Lamar Jackson's runs were designed. These were kind of more like, normally this would be your third read, but if you're going to go ahead and run, just go ahead and do it. And he, to his credit, Josh Allen has turned into an absolutely awesome producer in that offense. And when you look at Fields, most of his game, you'll look at the slow processor, which is true. He has a slow processor. It doesn't mean he's not intelligent. He's a very intelligent guy. It's just that when I looked at his games, he could go 2 to 3 quarters at a time without even making more than one read because of the way the offense was set up. But then there were also plays, Baker Mayfield certainly did that in Lincoln Riley's offense. Jeez, I mean, they first read, disguised first reads, triple disguise. I mean, it was like, if you weren't watching carefully, you'd think he was reading the entire field. I mean, it was when really it was just set up for one read. The thing with Fields is that, like many of the smartest NFL quarterbacks in the game, he has a slow processor in certain situations where only the fastest processor is really going to do for that part. And so while people conflate that with intelligence, I think that they need to understand that he's a guy who, when you look at certain games, the Alabama game, the Clemson game, there are moments where it's not just being plugged into the offense, it's him being able to process faster and show the ability to make multiple reads that he didn't always do in games like the Indiana game, which was awful, or the Penn State game. And it's kind of more of a turning on and off type of situation for him, which is still a concern. Do you really want a player who's kind of turned it on and off, in that processing level as your main guy? And I think some of that is, some of that may be system oriented. Some of that may just be him in terms of what you're looking at. But I think you have to live with Fields as a guy who has a lower floor because of the processing flaws that he's got to fix and might go unaddressed in a system that enables the worst of his game. But then you're also betting on him that maybe the team that he plays with will give him room and direction to grow, and that they can work him into good habits while not completely destroying his confidence when he expresses some of the bad ones. And if that happens, I mean, look at Carson Wentz. To me, Carson Wentz is a worse prospect than Justin Fields. If we're still looking at these guys of where they were, and people are willing to give Carson Wentz a second chance, and you look at the production that he was able to gain. So for me, Carson Wentz is to me, Justin Fields is a better prospect than Wentz. And if he gets to the right system, he can be a top 5 guy. But yeah, there are better or safer options in this class.
And I would pick Arthur Smith as a guy that could get that out of him. So watch for Atlanta. I know we have to cut this a little shorter because I'm on the air in 10 minutes. But anyway, let's bask in the glow of Trey Lance. And when he takes off to run, because a lot of people will soft scout. I think that's a new term. When I see someone with these wild opinions on Twitter, not that I pay attention or even should, but like when people are soft scouting, Trey Lance, it's level of competition. Okay, that's soft scouting. Let's talk about what he can do. The other thing that's brought up is like he takes off to run, like one read run. I think Lance is so good at identifying weaknesses that, yes, he'll make one read and run because he knows he's dangerous as a runner. Bloom, you said he was fun. I'll say he's fun and dangerous. Mm-hmm. And it's not like he's taken off to run out of fear or taken off to run out of lack of intelligence or awareness. He just knows what he can do with his physical gifts as a runner. And that's why he will make the one read and run, maybe as the people soft scout, too often.
Yeah, I know I don't want to steal your thunder here, Matt, because I know Matt tossed out the Steve McNair comparison, and I think, especially for folks that understand the history of, Matt talking about Steve McNair, understand that that's not one that would. I don't want to speak for you, Matt, but I don't think you throw out there lightly.
No.
And I think the real motif between the two of them is the competitive toughness. And also, just this sense of wanting to be in the middle of the bullets flying, relishing it. I mean, it's where he rises to the occasion. And what I love here is, look, first of all, he's just a dream physically. He's well built. I think everybody was shocked. He's really 6'3", 222. Yeah, he is well built. He's got springy athleticism. He's got a whip of an arm. I mean, arm strength, arm talent. Oh, man, no. And as a runner, he's got suddenness and elusiveness, but he's also tough. He'll run with a low pad level. He's got some swerve. He will initiate and win collisions, which might make his NFL coach say, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But I promise you, Trey Lance is going to make 5 to 10 plays a year in short yardage or otherwise when a team just has to get a first down. That it's going to be demoralizing for a defense as a runner. And like you say, Cease, it's not just because he relies on his running ability. It's just that he has plus running ability. But what I've really loved about Trey Lance is, sometimes when everything gets really tight and there's bodies around him in the pocket, he's a clear thinker. He plays the game with urgency, but not with the frantic thinking that we saw, say, from Robert Griffin III. He can go hot and cold as a passer. But I think that, this is one of those things that his ceiling is as high as Trevor Lawrence's, if it all comes into focus. He can keep his eyes downfield whenever he's sensing and moving and resetting. Again, this is something you don't necessarily see often from Justin Fields. His play action execution, and this is one of the things that gave me hope about Josh Allen whenever not a lot of people had hope. Josh Allen at Wyoming was one of the best at turning his back to the defense and just understanding all the moving parts and what he was going to be looking at when he turned back around. And Trey Lance has that. Trey Lance, again, you're seeing this starting to come out now. He is, in addition to being a physical dream, he is a cerebral quarterback. And he can engage the defense just about any way he wants to. I would be extremely excited if your team drafts Trey Lance, and just the hunger that the Panthers have at quarterback. I think if you hear that a team trades up to 2 or 3 or 4 to get a quarterback, if Lance is still on the board, I have a feeling it's going to be the Panthers getting Lance.
Listen, if I was rooting for Trey Lance for Baker Mayfield to have a bad season last year so that the Browns could get Trey Lance. I literally was talking about that on air last year. And this summer, Mark Schofield and I did a rookie scouting portfolio film room on Trey Lance where I dropped the Steve McNair comparison back in the summer. And a lot of it's because, like as Bloom said, the throwing motion, the capacity to run all different types of play action and drops from center, the ability to throw on the move with great placement at times. Now, people will talk about the placement being off at times and the inaccuracy, but some of that is that he's trying to place a scalpel between, basically a scalpel slice between a safety and a receiver that he probably shouldn't. And it's not necessarily a hospital ball. It's more of a tight margin throw that Matthew Stafford would try to do. And to me, when you watch him, one of the biggest things that people have issues with about Trey Lance is they say, but he, like you said, he tucks and runs after one read. Or that he's only throwing and he's checking down all the time. And look at his yardage. He didn't have great yardage. What most people don't understand, and this is even with I would say moderately hard scouting, is that the system at North Dakota State is literally coached to go short to deep instead of deep to short. And it's a pro style system without a doubt, but it's instructed tight end and running back first. So when you see him make these perfect throws downfield, up the seam, accounting for the safety, 30, 40, 50 yards downfield, across the opposite hash, that's often his third and fourth read that he's doing that with. Or he's being able to read the field and understand that he's going to skip some reads there pretty darn quickly to make that. So the processing is a lot better than actually the people who are denigrating the processing are showing that they don't understand the process that he's actually being coached to do, and that it's actually coming out looking better than the way that people would expect. So, could he use another year maybe? And maybe, some of the things that he's going to see defensively will be a little more confusing for him. Very possible, but all in all, this guy, he's my number 2 prospect in this class, and he's not that far away from Trevor Lance. He's got that equal upside. I agree.
We're just getting started. It's a return of the Audible Live, and as you can see, I got to talk about Aaron Gordon to the Denver Nuggets. You're so proud of me.
The Pelicans trade Lonzo Ball. I was out.
I appreciate each and every one of you for watching. He's Matt Waldman. He's Sigmund Bloom. I'm Cecil Lammey saying peace. Stay tuned and stay frosty.